Okay, guys, so we're going to walk through understanding basic literary analysis terminology. I'm going to just put this on here as an extra helpful resource. You're welcome to just look through the document yourself, but sometimes it kind of helps to get a little bit of an explanation. So there's a few things we want to make sure we look at here: character, literary devices, the structure of the piece, the narration, and any literary dynamics that may be in there. So when you guys think about characters, I want you guys thinking in larger terms than just who. Think about how the character is developed, the role they play, and any attributes that might be attributed to them. So think about these lovely character terminology that we get, like flat or static, meaning one-dimensional or unchanging. Dynamic and round means fully developed and changing throughout the story. Are they engaging? Are they boring? Etc. You also want to think about how they contribute to the larger plot, the main idea, or the message. So are they fulfilling a particular role or an archetype? Are they working against secondary? They can be the protagonist or antagonist. They can be an archetype like the evil stepmother. Or they could be fulfilling just a specific function within the plot. So maybe they're there to help move the plot forward in a certain way. You also want to think about character attributes. So think about their personality, their physicality, their spirituality, how they change or don't change, the beliefs and values they hold, etc. A lot of times you have a character who's representing maybe a specific social norm or social ideology of the time period. All of these things are really important to think about when you think about character. Another thing to think about is some basic literary devices that can be helpful. So things like a simile or a metaphor. The first is a comparison using like or as. The second is without like or as. Personification, which is where you add a human element or attribute to an inanimate object. So example, the sun smiled down on me today. So that would be an example for personification. You also want to think about what the structure of the work is. So for example, a short story is going to be structured much different than a drama. Poetry, etc. All of these have specific structures. You also want to think about conflict. So there's four traditional types of conflicts in a text. Man versus man would be something like Harry versus Lord Voldemort. Man versus nature, of course, would be like Tom Hanks versus the island in Castaway. Man versus society. So, for example, I've given you Katniss Everdeen versus the Games in the Hunger Games, or Man versus Self. So this would be like Batman battling all of his special issues. Irony, there's three kinds. So people often use the word ironic incorrectly. Irony means something's happening different than what you expect. So verbal irony is where the words mean something different than what the person is saying. So you say, I was so excited to go shopping with my great aunt for tea sets. You're using verbal irony there. Situational irony is where something different happens than what's expected to happen. For example, the ending of Lost. Everyone expected some big dramatic ending, and in the end, they find out they all were actually dead. And if I just spoiled Lost for you, I'm sorry. And then dramatic irony is the most common in literary text. So this is where the audience is more aware of what's happening than the characters are. So, for example, when Romeo kills himself, you as the audience know that Juliet is only sleeping. So that would be dramatic irony. Foreshadowing is when an audience gets to preview a future event or conflict through an advanced sign or warning. And then the opposite of that, of course, is a flashback, which is where you look back in the story to a previous event and it adds something to the narration or the plot. The solution is often called the resolution or the denouement. This is when everything gets sort of wrapped up. This doesn't mean that everything necessarily gets wrapped up nice and neat, but it's when the story comes to a close and the conflict reaches some kind of resolution, whether that's satisfactory or not. The narrator is, again, the speaker in the story. There are three basic kinds of narrators, three kinds of points of view that you often see. You see first person, which is using the word I. So I wondered what the best option to eat was. Third person limited omniscient means you see it from the outside, so use the pronouns he, she, they, but you cannot see necessarily inside the character's mind. So you say, he seemed unsure of his choice as his eyes darted back and forth between the menu options. Third person omniscient is where you see into the character's mind. Once again, use the outside viewpoint, so he, she, they, but you can see what they're thinking. So, for example, he knew salad would be healthier, but decided that meatball sub was better. Certain literary elements, a theme and a motif. These are two different things. A lot of people get them confused. A theme is the overarching concept, idea, or message of the text. So a major theme in Harry Potter is loyalty or friendship or bravery. A motif is a recurring concept or idea. So, for example, Monet, he uses natural elements like the lilies and the water, uses the motif of violet throughout his works. In literary works, you'll see this as something like the color red is a motif. A symbol is an object or an idea, so it's a physical or metaphorical object or idea which represents one concept but stands for something else. So the book in Fahrenheit 451 is more than just a book. It's a symbol for social rebellion and the freedom of individual thought. An allusion is a reference, whether direct or indirect, to another work, person, idea, concept, historical event, whatever. So if I said he was as strong as Samson, you would know that refers to Samson and Delilah from the Bible. And you would understand what that means. So the tone is the overall feel of a piece. So it could be suspenseful, tragic, sarcastic, depressing, horror. That's what we mean by tone. Style is the manner of writing used by that author. So it can be traditional or experimental. So, for example, I think I've not read it, but the novel Gone Girl uses a distinct style with present narration and then journal entries from the woman, right, to tell the other side of the story. That's a very distinct style. And that's it. So I just want to make sure you guys had a good understanding of all this. Go ahead and return to the week's folder and continue on with your first bit of reading for the week.